Welcome back to Third Age Reforged and another battle replay, and the army composition process this time is likely to be pretty fast because this is the realm of Mirkwood, so most of the enemy units are hidden underneath the trees and we won't be able to see them. Nonetheless, I'll go through what we can see, and as the battle goes on we'll just sort of mention the units as they go. Obviously timestamp for the battle starting will be down in the description below, as well as the link to the ModDB and to the Reforged Discord if you want to join. And yeah, so we'll go through the army composition, of course. Now I'm playing as Isengard. This is a 2v2v2, so it's a sort of three-way free-for-all between three teams of two. I'm playing as Isengard. I've got several units of Uruk-hai infantry, of course. Pretty much a standard Isengard fare. There's nothing really out of the ordinary here. I've got some Dunland veterans just to back up my Uruk-hai infantry, and then up here, just for a little bit of fodder, I've got some Dunland clansmen. And as we go through, it's going to be a little difficult to go through even all of my units with all these trees in the way, but I've also got some Berserkers, very good once you get them into melee, very vulnerable to missiles however. And then back here I've got a couple of units of Warg skirmishers backing up my general's unit, which is a unit of champions of the White Hand, and there is my general. Won't be able to see him for too much longer in this fight. I've also got some Uruk-hai pikemen somewhere hidden in here, of course, because this is standard Isengard fare. You want pikemen as Isengard. In fact, I think these are them. Nope, these are the crossbowmen, so yeah, crossbows as well. We'll move on to my ally, or what we can see of my ally anyway. And that is Master Blaster playing as Mordor. He's got some Temple Guard, he's got some Lesser Balrogs, he's got some Temple Inquisitors, so he's got some very elite units indeed. But then he's also got a lot of lower tier stuff, so he's got some Uruks, some Morannon Guard. You don't see much of them anymore because of course spears are a little bit underpowered as it stands. Moving forward, we've got some Uruk halberds, a pretty decent halberdier unit, and of course we've got some fodder, deploying some stakes just to make life a little bit more difficult for anyone that wants to attack us right off the bat. And then we've got some Orc archers as well. So now we'll go through what we can of the two other teams' armies, one of which their army is almost completely hidden. So we have Stormin Mormon 42 playing as Dale. He's got a unit of Earls backed up by a unit of Dalian cavalry. And then over here he's also got an artillery piece. And then moving a little further in, he's got some Dalian spearmen, some Dalian marksmen, some Avari Elder pikemen, and some Avari Elder archers. So he's got a good skirmish force, of course. And then down here he's also got a couple of units of sword masters, and he's also got some 8th Wodia horse guards. The rest of his army is hidden under trees somewhere, I believe. So we'll move on to his ally, and Escal Nordir's army he's playing as Dol Amroth, of course. It's orcs, elves, and men as the three teams. Playing as Dol Amroth, a very strong, probably the strongest of the human factions at the moment, I would say. Simply because I think they offer a little bit more. It's close between them and Rune, to be honest with you, but I think this unit in particular, the Edelond Halberdiers, offer Dol Amroth just that little bit more solidity in their front line, whereas some of Rune's units can be a little bit fragile. He's also got some Tirith Eir marksmen, some Coastal Wardens, more Halberdiers, some Tirith Eir Wardens, Haven Guard, of course. You never see Dol Amroth without their Haven Guard. Then 3 units of Dol Amroth men-at-arms. Then back here he's got some Dor en Ernil Lancers. And then down here, I believe this is the final unit he has, which is a trebuchet, which is all on its lonesome, which is a little bit concerning for him, because I Am a Kind Guy is playing as the Woodland Realms. Many people think that the Woodland Realms are the strongest faction in the game at the moment. Possibly. It depends how aggressive you like being. If you like being aggressive, then Gundabad is the best. But yes, he's got some Hirti Dirith, so a nice sword and board unit. Forest Wardens, good spears, some of the cheaper Woodland Realms units. The Hirti Bang already in range of that trebuchet, and the trebuchet is likely going to be taken away from him almost immediately. He's also got some Elder Royal Guard. These guys are very, very effective. They've got axes, so they're armor piercing in melee. And just in general, you can have 2 before the cost increases. One of the main reasons why the Woodland Realms skirmish force is so potent. He's also got the Elder Royal Council, which as a singular unit is the best archer that they can field. And I think that's all we can see from him. The rest of his units will be hidden, because of course a lot of the Woodland Realms units can hide. And then over here, what we can see of Peanut's army, playing as Lothlorien, of course. Not much of his army is going to be visible at all. These Sindar Blade Masters shouldn't really be visible from the off anyway, but here they are nonetheless. He's also got his Galathrim veteran warriors, very strong unit indeed, and then he's got a couple of units of Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen, sans the armour upgrade. But we'll just see what happens to this trebuchet, because there is a bit of a lull at the start of this battle, so I will make a cut after this trebuchet is inevitably destroyed by the Woodland Realms, because I know the Woodland Realms have got some Elder Pathfinders, and look at that. The accuracy of the elves, even through the trees, the trebuchet crew doesn't stand a chance. Obviously, when you're deploying, you really need to remember to move your artillery, otherwise it will suffer the fate that these poor souls are currently... Oh dear, what was that? Weird camera issues there, but yeah, a trebuchet crew is obviously not going to stand up too well to skirmish fire. Some of the skirmish fire is hitting the actual trebuchets and getting blocked, but not much of it because the elves are so accurate. And yeah, this is the end of the trebuchet. Brutal Woodland Realms fire, it's like a machine gun. But yeah, the trebuchet is gone. And with that, they are going to be just mown down, they're too slow to get away. And with that, I'll make a little cut until the battle is joined, because there's a little bit of manoeuvring around, the teams just sort of taking their positions on the field more often than not. So yeah, I'll see you on the other side of the cut. So Mordor are moving forward first, my ally, and obviously as you can see from the minimap, both Dale and Dol Amroth have taken up a very defensive position up on this sort of raised ground here. And this is going to lead more often than not in a free-for-all to teams attempting to gang up. And this is exactly what essentially us and the elves decided to do initially, because if we just went at each other, there's no way we would have the numbers nor the sheer force to try and break through this position. Dol Amroth and Dale are very effective at holding a line, particularly when they're in unison. And obviously you can see that the Woodland Realms, this is the sort of thing that the Woodland Realms can do to you in a skirmish fight. The Tirithea marksmen are a good archer unit, and they are being ripped apart by the Woodland Realms skirmish forces. We can of course see the Dalian cavalry coming out here, both their 8th Wodia horse guards, but of course they are immediately targeted by the archers, and the Elven archers being what they are, they immediately start to fall. Here is the Woodland Realms cavalry. So I'm a Kind Guy did indeed bring the Elder Kingsguard and a couple of units of Elder Pathfinders, as is common place with the Woodland Realms, and it gives them really the strongest cavalry of all the elves as well, because they can simply afford more cavalry with hit points than the High Elves, and that is the important thing. And over here we can see the Kingsguard. The 8th Wodia Horse Guard really don't stand a chance against Kingsguard nor Pathfinders in sustained melee. They are pretty much a pure shot cavalry unit, and they're not even better than the Woodland Realms cavalry at doing that. Fortunately, I think the Pathfinders will be losing their hit points in the next patch, which is probably for the best. Particularly if they are meant to be a skirmish faction in general. We can see down here the Woodland Realms archer forces. Just continually, even with the trees in the way, they are going to be able to do a significant amount of damage to the very densely packed formations of Dale and Dol Amroth. Dale being more aggressive than his ally here, sending out his Swordmasters, and he's sending out a unit of Dalian cavalry as well. The Swordmasters will be able to beat the Forest Wardens in melee, but even so the Forest Wardens are, well, the Dale Swordmasters I should say, are a little exposed out here, and this may well count against him. Of course I deployed pretty far away, so I'm trying to sort of catch up with my ally, because he's going to mount an assault on the human factions from the other side. Looking at this though, looking at how quickly the Woodland Realms have managed to take advantage of Dale's rather scattered sort of sally out and trying to meet them. You can also see Lothlorien's army has arrived. Peanuts with some of his Sindar Blade Masters going to be more than enough to deal with Dalian Spearman. It was probably worthwhile in hindsight to sit back a little bit and let the elves wear themselves down a little bit on the human factions, because of course the elves, particularly the Woodland Realms, are so powerful. And over there we can see the Dor en Ernil Lancers are coming out, and he is actually attacking my ally in the side. The Orc Archers trying to sort of get into a position to shoot down onto the other side of the human position. The Dor en Ernil Lancers of course will mow down Orc Archers without too much problem. And of course over here we have the Orc Fodder. Unfortunately all of the Wargs were in my army and they're still quite far away, so we weren't able to really answer this initial charge, this initial cavalry action from Dol Amroth. However, down here it's going much worse for the human factions. The kind of overextension that Dale's infantry forces have sort of gotten themselves into, the Lothlorien and the Woodland Realms infantry is able to very easily trap and pin them down, and also there's the Woodland Realms cavalry, which you can't underestimate here. Over here though, the Swordmasters have managed to sort of deal with those initial waves of Forest Wardens, but unfortunately they now have exposed themselves to the Woodland Realms archers, and that means they are probably not long for this world. There's also Forest Bladesmen here ensuring that the Swordmasters can't simply try and charge down the archers. The Forest Bladesmen are under attack from the archers that are up here, but if we look over here there's a lot of dead archers. The Nimrodel Rangers were also subject to a lot of damage from the Woodland Realms skirmish power. You can't skirmish down the Woodland Realms. If they bring a skirmish heavy army, they can take on anyone. They're simply too strong in melee as well, and this is even with all of these Dalian marksmen, which as a mid-tier archer are very effective. Let's go and have a look at the Woodland Realms army and their skirmish position. We can see that the Elder Royal Guard have taken losses. So Dale, while they will lose the skirmish fight in the long run, because of course Lothlorien have still got their archers to come, considering the sheer amount of archers that they had, you would expect the Woodland Realms to have lost this, but instead they're going to win it. And you can see the Elder Royal Council still pretty healthy. And in the background here we've got the Dirith, we've got all of the Woodland Realms cavalry still to come. Meanwhile, if we look over here, we can see that the Swordmasters are being enveloped by several units of elves, the Forest Bladesmen, and the Forest Wardens, I believe. Nope, it's just Forest Bladesmen. So to answer this, a very depleted unit of Dalian Spearmen is coming down to sort of try and reinforcement, but they are going to be blocked off by a unit of Forest Bladesmen. The Dale Swordmasters are still going to do very well against these lightly armoured lower tier elves, because it's kind of what they like to fight. But ultimately they are going to find themselves isolated and surrounded if they're not careful. Meanwhile, if we look back up here, where my ally is doing his work, we have basically the swarm of orcs chasing away the Dol Amroth cavalry. The Dor and Ernil Lancers do not have hit points, so they will not be, they won't have the staying power to just charge Mordor's army into oblivion, particularly not when my forces arrive. Back here, we can see that my ally did have some cavalry. The Mounted Númenórean Shield Guard are a little bit underwhelming, to be honest with you, but they will do the job against Dor and Ernil Lancers when they're backed up by even lower tier spears like the Morannon Guard. So this unit of Lancers is going to find themselves quickly outclassed and destroyed, and you can see that my army, as well as some of my allies' hidden units, are streaming down in, and then we will be able to launch a more sustained assault on the human position, and hopefully we can take that human position because it is the elevated ground, and we will need it if we're going to go toe to toe with Lothlorien and the Woodland Realms in their home, on their home turf as well. And one of the reasons why I was so cautious moving forward is because I didn't actually know where the bulk of Lothlorien's army were, and we still don't. The vast majority of the elves that have been revealed are the Woodland Realms. We have here the Dalian Spearmen, going to be recharged by Forest Bladesmen. It's really only the lower tier Woodland Realms infantry that has been committed forward into these initial skirmish fights, just in front of the human defensive position up there. That's going to be very difficult for the elves to try and smash through, even with their skirmish power. But we shall see. Over here, the Dale Swordmasters now defeat. Well, it keeps flicking between victory and defeat, but that's just a sign that they're being worn down. Another unit being committed over here will be enough. In fact, the Sindar Blademasters coming on site is probably what's going to be the thing that causes the Dale Swordmasters to fall here. So that's very unfortunate for them. Look in the background, the Woodland Realms skirmish forces have largely sort of retreated. Nimrodale Rangers, you can see up here the human position, trying to camp this hill, which is why we were sort of both going for them. Interestingly enough, the Avari Elder Archers over here, unchallenged, are shooting their ammunition into my ally's army as he advances. Although we can see over here that he's only really targeting sort of basic stuff like Uruks that are already very depleted. So that's fine. And we can see over here that there's still some, they're routing. So the Dor and Ernil are now gone, essentially, from the fight. My ally's army is pretty unorganised, but that's what you expect from Mordor, just sort of waiting to get into position, and then we'll launch an assault on the human position from the other side, at least partially, while protecting our flank from any possible Elven advances. We can see here the Mounted Númenórean Shield Guard. Only 14 of them remaining after tangling with the Dol Amroth cavalry. And we can see over here that the other unit of Lancers is about to find themselves caught by the Elder Pathfinders, so the Woodland Realms cavalry, probably the most potent weapon left to them now that their archers and Dale and Dol Amroth's archers have essentially cancelled themselves out on one another. You can see these Dale Swordmasters have actually done very well. The Sindar Blademasters have retreated from this position. I don't know where they went, but they decided to leave the Swordmasters to... Oh, there they are. I suppose they got charged by the Lancers, that's why they're a little worse for wear at the moment, but the cavalry's now pulling back. The Galadhrim veteran warriors are over here. So the Lothlorien player has got some of his forces over there, but a lot of their units are sort of hanging further back. You can see that the Woodland Realms is back there. And you can see that my army is now slowly starting to sort of crest the horizon, as it were, but still the primary fight is down over here. You can see that another unit of Dalian Spearmen was sent forward to try and relieve the Swordmasters, but they were intercepted by a unit of Forest Bladesmen. A depleted unit of Forest Bladesmen though, so the Dalian Spearmen do have a chance in melee here. We'll have to see how it goes. This is of course a quicker battle than normal, because usually when I show a Horton scenario it's 50,000 frames plus. This one is just shy of 30,000, which isn't an overly short battle, but it's still shorter than most of the ones that I end up showing. Yeah, the Woodland Realms. Now the Sindar Blademasters are back in combat, and this means that the Dale Swordmasters are not long for this well, but they've done a pretty good job. They managed to slice down some lower tier elves Time will tell whether this was a good move for the humans or not. If we look back over here, you can see there are still some Dort and Urnal Lancers, but there are only 8 of them, and they're doomed now. Still 3 mounted Númenórean Shield Guard, the Uruks. The Lancers are not long for this world. And over here we can see that my ally is making a concerted push onto the lines over here. We can see the Avari Elder Pikemen holding the line, definitely one of the best pikemen in the game still. Not quite as strong as they were back in 0.86, or was it 0.90, where it was essentially these guys were probably the strongest pikes in the game. This was before the Imladris guards were added. They're still very good, don't get me wrong, but they have, you know, they aren't really as good as the Imladris guards or the Arnor Gate guards. Nonetheless, they are still an effective unit at holding a line, particularly against lower tier orcs like this. The orcs don't really have the staying power to sort of slice through them, and of course you can see the Avari Elder pikemen just sort of pushing back the orc line. You know, we need to sort of commit more forces if we're going to punch through the front here, which again, this is probably not the best way to deal with the pike line. Sending forward your lower tier units like Moran on Guard, it's probably best to try and skirmish them down a little bit before you do that. But unfortunately, we don't really have the skirmish advantage when it comes to facing off against Dol Amroth or Dale. Meanwhile, if we look over here, the Dalian line has formed up again. The spears are in position, and if we look over here, we can see that my army is sort of just setting itself up over here to just sort of try and check the advance of the elves. Because of course the elves are over there and they could try and flank around us, so I've got my wargs, that should be enough to ward off the Woodland Realms cavalry that's already seen battle, and I've got my crossbows as well, which in close range skirmish should be able to go toe to toe with Lothlorien, but at long range of course very much not the case. Let's have a look here. Yes, my ally is now doing the right thing. He's trying to get around the pipeline with a unit of Uruks, trying to attack into the side. That's the best way to deal with this situation. So we're not going to win from the front. The Avari pikemen just continually poking, and you can actually see them advance forward. It's one of the rare times where you see a pikeman getting their killing done pretty quickly. The Avari look is pretty good. I do like the way they have like hoods. It's interesting. I don't think that they'll become their own faction. I think they are going to stay as units that both Dale and the Woodland Realms have available to them, as opposed to sort of being their own things. There isn't really enough material to work with to make them their own faction. I know that Dorwinian is a thing in Divide and Conquer, but I'm not sure it's going to be a thing here, because there is a unit cap as to how many units you're actually allowed in the game. And I think before Dorwinian is talked about being added, that will have already been maxed out. So we have Uruks trying to face down the Avari pikemen. It's not really going too well. Meanwhile, if we look down here, the other front, these Forest Bladesmen are still fighting, but things are looking pretty bad for them. The Dalian Spearmen slowly but surely dealing with them, but now Peanuts is sending forward another unit of his Sindar Blademasters, and this will turn the fight back in the favour of the Elves. Sindar Blademasters will tear their way through Dalian Spearmen without too much effort. Of course, all of this armour piercing is not really useful against the 2 elves that rely least of all on armour. Lothlorien especially, I think, in the current patch. I think that's the way round it is. We shall see. Meanwhile, we can see that there's more orc fodder. The Avari Elder Archers that are out of ammunition are now being committed to melee. Of course, as elves, they are pretty good. I like the fact they've got sort of short sabres. They've got a very assassin-like look for them. They don't really blend in with their brass-coloured armour, though. The fodder is, well, actually, they are retreating in the face of the fodder. That's weird, although that is because Escal Nordir is now sending forward a force to sort of form up a secondary line with Dol Amroth Men-at-Arms and Edhalond Halberdiers. Orc fodder is not going to be enough to get through there, and there's also Orc Archers that are out of ammunition, I believe. Yes, they are. Still, the mass that Mordor is putting onto this front line is going to cause some attritional casualties, but you can see, just look at the Orcs. There's hardly any dead pikemen. Again, this just goes to show, this is basically the perfect example of why I can't wait for Linden. Because this is the sort of thing that elite pikemen can do. Lower tier pikes struggle with this a little more because they don't have as much mass, so they buckle a little easier. And obviously they don't have as high attack, but Elven pikes like this, you can just see where the line was and how they've pushed them back. If they move up the Edhalond Halberdiers and the Dol Amroth Men-at-Arms as well, there isn't really much hope for my ally over here. Mordor and their low tier horde, it's not really working out here against the elite forces of Dale, the Avari and Dol Amroth. Meanwhile, if we look back over here, you can see that the Dalian catapult has somehow managed to survive. I'm not sure how, if it's down there. You can see that these Avari Elder Archers are actually coming down here. They retreated from the front line up there, and they are going to try and go toe-to-toe with the Sindar Blade Masters. Sindar Blade Masters being dedicated sort of light armour slaying infantry. I would definitely put this still in favour of the Sindar Blade Masters, although they will take more casualties now with the Avari on hand. We'll see how that goes, it depends. I mean, I imagine the elves will send up some reinforcements over here. However, we can see that I've got a force sort of flanking around here, so finally I'm doing something in this battle. We can see that I'm going to try and get into the rear of Dol Amroth's defences. I've sent, I believe, both units of my Berserkers and my 3 units of Dunland Veterans, because the armour piercing I figured would not be very useful against the elves. So I sent it all over here to try and deal with the human factions, and my ally is now sending forward his lesser Balrogs to try and smash through the front lines, which is a good move as well. So I'm sending my Berserkers in to the rear of the Coastal Wardens, trying to make it so they can't fire their jabbies into the lesser Balrogs. Of course, the Coastal Wardens don't have a prayer in melee against Isengard's Berserkers. The Two Towers was on TV last night, so if you live in the UK you might be able to date this one. So Dunland Veterans, you know, they don't really stand too much of a chance in sustained melee against the likes of Dol Amroth and Dale's elite infantry units, but they will do more damage than you'd expect with their axes. And that's all I really need to do. I need to just hold, let my Berserkers sort of go up and down the lines here of Dol Amroth and try and make a way in for my ally. We can see that my ally also has some Melkor's Chosen over here. He needs to be careful with them. He's also got another, he's got mounted Temple Inquisitors, so he invested quite heavily in his cav. This was a couple of weeks ago that we filmed this, well, that we did this one. So also we have my Dunland Veterans sort of getting into melee against these Dol Amroth men-at-arms. Sort of the disparity between the well-equipped, well-trained men of Dol Amroth and the wild, savage men of Dunland. Just basic chainmail. Function over form, certainly, and their wooden shields next to Dol Amroth's much more professional looking equipment. We can see over here that Dale is sort of mounting a bit of an assault on the elves over here. Not only were his Avari archers committed out here, I don't know where they went precisely, but he's also going to be sending out his earls. Still some archer fire coming down onto this position as well, although these Elder Pathfinders are going to get a brutal charge into the backs of these Dalian marksmen. Catapult firing off, not flaming shot though, so it only managed to get 1 kill. These Sindar Blade Masters on the front line are doomed though. That's very interesting. You can see that I'm sort of just pushing forward a little bit with my wargs, just sort of probing a little bit. You can see that Lothlorien just sort of pulling back. The elves doing the smart thing here, really, letting us sort of waste our numbers on the human front. If we look back over here again, defeat seems certain for my Dunland Veterans, but they're doing what I need them to do and just sort of holding back the Dol Amroth reinforcements, and they're going to get some damage done. You can see that there are dead Dol Amroth men-at-arms here, so some damage is being done, and the Dol Amroth men-at-arms are a very good standard infantry unit, so it speaks well of the Dunland Veterans. They were able to get some decent damage done. You see over here my Berserkers doing a lot of damage, getting into a high tier unit here, the Tirithea Wardens, and getting a lot of kills. It's exactly the sort of unit they like going up against. Berserkers, of course, they were really fantastic in vanilla. They've had peaks and troughs in the development of Reforged as to how useful they've been. At the moment, I would say not really, because the skirmish power in the game at the moment is such that the Berserkers, with their sort of malice against archers, really do struggle. But in this situation, they are still quite a potent weapon, dealing with the Tirithea Wardens. The Lesser Balrog still very much alive. Finally, the Lesser Balrog getting into the back of the pikes was what was really needed. You can see the Temple Guard also firing into the Etalond Halberdiers. And suddenly the human position is looking quite unstable. You can see that these Earls are running around, trying to do their best. The Earls, of course, are a very strong cavalry unit in sustained melee with all that armour. They don't have lances though, so their charge is not quite as effective. But again, similar to the White Knights, doesn't really matter because they do have that mass that is important. It looks like now though Dale is going to go around and try and rear-charge our position in the back. But of course we can't really afford that. Mordor has already taken some substantial losses from attempting to take that Avari pipeline head on. You can see that the mounted Temple Inquisitors are over here. Certainly not the same unit as their dismounted brethren. There's simply too few of them to be super effective. However, fortunately, I do have my warg skirmishers on hand. I believe this unit is out of ammunition. Well, actually, no, they're still throwing. But yeah, the warg skirmishers is exactly what they want to do. Fire their javelins into a unit that's already occupying the elves, are very quickly starting to fall. So with the assistance of my wargs, we're going to deal with basically the only truly healthy unit of human cavalry that's left on the field. There's also those 2 shield guard there. So yeah, the elves are now trapped in melee, and that's going to be it for them. Mordor's army is starting to look pretty small though. The Melkor's Chosen is still here, but it's looking pretty bad for us. I've got very little, and oh, there goes the Dale General. Killed by the Melkor's Chosen with their huge maces. You can see that there's really not very many of my Dunland veterans left, and they will not do very well against Edelond halberds. But they did manage to hold, and they actually did manage to force a retreat from Dol Amroth, and now Mordor is trying to follow through on that. I've got my berserkers, and once again I'm going to use my berserkers to try and go around and up here. Yeah. Again, we can see down here, I've got my champions of the White Hand, my warg skirmishers, and my Dunland clansmen just to offer a bit of fluff. You can see the rest of my army is over here just sort of waiting for the elves. Hindsight is 20/20, but it doesn't really work out for me. You can see the warg skirmishers just walking around. We'll get a close-up look at how dirty they look. It looks like they've got fish heads. I think the wargs are getting a new unit model, I think. In the next patch, I've heard some discussion about that in the Discord, but we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. Again, I know that unit model upgrades are going to be something that's something that's already mostly done, I think. It's just a case of ironing out the stats. I believe today was the day they were actually talking about Mordor and Isengard, so that's quite thematic. Still, now the lesser Balrogs are unfortunately beginning to spend their strength, and they're into these sort of halberdiers and these Dalian marksmen that have pulled out their axes. So things are not looking too great for them, unfortunately for us. My berserkers are still trying to flank around, but we're really running out of, well, my ally at least is running out of troops. Now over here I was just sort of hoping, at this point, for something. I knew we needed to break through on the other front, so I was telling my ally if he had anything else to spare on the other side to follow my Dunland clansmen in, but unfortunately the catapult is right there. It's going to fire right into the front of them. The Dunland clansmen, of course, don't stand a chance against Edelond halberdiers, but I was hoping to get some reinforcements, and I was going to actually send over some of my other units, some of my Uruk-hai pikemen, to follow in my Dunland clansmen, and hopefully we could break through over here, because at this point we were not feeling too confident about winning. We knew that we had made a bit of a mistake by making an alliance with the elves early on. But again, it's kind of a reflex reaction. If you're a faction of Freefall and you try and camp a hill, the other factions are going to gang up on you. And that's what we were doing, but unfortunately the battle hasn't really gone in our favour. As the Orcs are always going to take quite a few losses, and unfortunately the elves have managed themselves a little better up to this point. Having said that, we do still have a chance. I do still have healthy wargs. I do still have my crossbows and pikemen as well, so if we can manage to take this hill without too many losses, well, too many more losses, and get into a defensive posture up here, the elves may well struggle, but unfortunately they're going for overwhelming force, and my Dunland clansmen don't really stand much of a chance. However, getting my berserkers into the back line, unfortunately the Haven Guard are here to respond. The Haven Guard will be very sufficient to deal with my berserkers, unfortunately. But my ally's got his Melkor's Chosen up here, so if we can get some hammer and anvil in here, that would be exactly what we need. My other berserkers are sort of trying to get into the back of the Edelond halberdiers, but the line is simply too thick, and we're just wearing ourselves down on it. So trying to flank around a second time with my berserkers hasn't really worked out in the same way that it did the first time, in the way that it broke the line. If we go in a little closer, we can see there are Temple Inquisitors on this front line, but unfortunately the Edelond halberdiers are so strong for the cost. There's not really much we can do to get around here. However, if we look over here, we can see that Lothlorien, this is basically the first, well, this was basically the first time I've seen Lothlorien used for the purpose that they were intended, a pure ambush. As I was sort of microing my berserkers, I wasn't paying attention to my main army, and unfortunately Lothlorien basically pulled back around that way and went up onto this hill with all his archers, and he's now shooting down onto my main army, and my army is basically defenseless over here. As we can see, he's going for my crossbows, so he knows exactly what to go for, because the crossbows are really the thing that could still win us this fight. and he is just spraying his archers down onto here. So this is, this is the most brutal ambush I think I've ever been subject to in Reforged so far, because I just wasn't paying attention. I was trying to micro my berserkers into the backlines of Dale and Dol Amroth, and this was essentially the betrayal, as it were. The elves finally decided they had enough of being in an alliance with us, and decided to just get rid of a lot of my army. Of course, my knee-jerk reaction to this was to charge my Uruk-hai infantry up the hill. Unfortunately, though, he's also got, if we go through the trees down here, he's also got Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen ready. So he definitely thought this out. He thought this out very well. And if we try and get in here, I'm trying to sort of engage his archers in melee, but it doesn't really matter because he's also got Sylvan Heavy Spearmen, which were hidden, blocking my path to his archers, and my Uruk-hai infantry is not going to be able to get through them in any kind of hurry. And at this point I realise just how bad a situation I'm in. I'm also subject to a rear charge from the Lothlorien Cavalry, the Galadriel mounted company, which is very fast, sprung its ambush, and it managed to charge the crossbows, managed to somehow avoid my Uruk-hai pikemen. Look at that as well. Look how accurate the Elven archers are, just spraying into my pikes. Defeat is almost a certainty. There's really no hope for me at this point. They spun me a web, and unfortunately this is it for me. The Woodland Realms is also... Look at this, the elves have finally decided to commit all their elite units onto me, basically. The Dirith, the Galathrun veteran warriors, Sylvan Heavy Swordsmen, and my basic Uruk-hai infantry doesn't stand a chance in a fight like this. You can see Haldir leading the way there at the front.
Half the enemy force remains.
Haldir and Thranduil really sticking the boot into me at the moment, and people say that I show battles in which I never lose. Well, this is me being humiliated. Again, it was my mistake, because I didn't think that this hill was one that you could go over initially, because I saw this bit of outcropping rock and I thought, oh well, that's a hill that, that's a feature of the map that you can't go over. But unfortunately you can go over that. And now you can see the Galathrun mounted company rear charging my Uruk-hai infantry, and it's all but over for me at this point. I mean, I'm trying to, as you can see over here on the minimap, you can see that I'm trying to sort of get as many of my units out of there as possible. But really to no avail. I mean, most of my army at this point is gone. And you can see that also the Woodland Realms Cavalry decided to sort of occupy my wargs. And this is a testament to how strong the Woodland Realms Cavalry is. I had 3 units of wargs, 2 skirmishes admittedly. But the Woodland Realms Cavalry, despite already seeing battle, it was enough to basically destroy my wargs. Only 7 of my champions of the White Hand remain. And now the rest of the Woodland Realms Cavalry is going to come in here. Here you can see the iconic Uruk-hai infantry being slaughtered by Thranduil's finest. And over here we can see the Galathrun mounted company side charging my Uruk-hai. To be fair to my Uruk-hai infantry, they've held out quite a while considering they were basically blitzkrieged. And they are a very good unit, the Uruk-hai infantry, for what they cost, but ultimately in this situation they stood no chance. And over here I'm trying to use my crossbows, the crossbows that I couldn't retreat. But yeah, absolutely brutal ambush from Lothlorien and the Woodland Realms. Primarily Lothlorien, because they were the ones that were hidden and initiated the assault. The Woodland Realms essentially took me front on and occupied too many of my units for me to be able to respond to this in a way that would have been appropriate. But yeah, it was my bad. I didn't... The lesson here is to not stray too far away from your ally, especially on a map where there's a lot of cover, because otherwise your enemy can do this sort of thing to you and ambush you. And yeah, unfortunately my Uruk-hai, they're not going to be good enough to deal with the Elven ambush that I was subject to. Meanwhile, if we look over here, you can see that things have not gone in our favour over here either. The human front line has managed to hold, despite the fact that the Temple Inquisitors are in here and victory seems certain. The humans have held. You can see that my berserkers are now all but gone. The Haven Guard are beat up, but they're still alive. The Mounted Temple Inquisitor's not going to be enough. And you can see that over here, amazingly, my Dunland clansmen are still fighting. They are now wavering, and they have gotten negligible kills, but they have been fighting for a long time. So if I was able to get my pikemen over here, it probably would have been enough to really pin the human factions in place. But again, the elves. And this time, This was just fantastic play. Well, not fantastic. I mean, it was foolish of me, admittedly, to put my army so close to a tree line like that, because the elves were obviously going to take full advantage of that if they could, and they did. You can see that some of my Uruk-hai are still fighting. But yeah, it was still a very well thought out ambush, still the best ambush I've seen, or at least that I've been a part of on Reforged so far. And of course, Lothlorien are a faction which are meant to be good at ambushes, and it really did prove that so here. Lothlorien are definitely my favourite of the 3 Elven factions, mainly because there's not really a crutch that you can rely on with Lothlorien. Like the Woodland Realms and the High Elves, you can essentially just pick all of their finest skirmish units, sit in a block, and then you can basically go AFK and win. But with Lothlorien it requires a little bit more thought to win, and it's a lot more satisfying when you do, I find. So of the Elven factions, they're certainly my favourite at the moment. That could change, of course, in the next patch when things are reworked a little bit, because I am quite okay with the idea of the Woodland Realms being skirmish heavy, just not the Death Star that they are right now. And victory seems certain for the Sylvan Heavy Spearmen. Of course, they will kill the Uruk-hai quite slowly, but kill them they will. Hunting some orc. Meanwhile, if we go back over here, we can see that what I managed to escape with of my pikemen, I'm just going to try and sort of form up a rear line over here, because the humans will probably fall before we do at this rate. Because the Temple Inquisitors and what's left of my allies' army, you can see that he's also got the Nazgul, so the 9 are in play. Finally, the Adhalond Halberdiers are crumbling, and all it took was the finest units of Mordor. These are another one of those units which I don't really agree with how strong they are, but fortunately I do think they are going to get a bit of a nerf. We can see the Galatharan Mounted Company are going to recharge the Halberdiers. They are shaken. So the Kingdoms of Men and the Scourge of the Orcs, it looks like we're going to be wiped away, because the Elves definitely have a severe advantage at this point. Lothlorien have got a very intact army. The Woodland Realms still have their most elite units in the pocket. Fortunately, I do still have some crossbows, so I'm trying to sort of make the Woodland Realms cavalry pay a little bit. We can see that the Woodland Realms army is marching in behind over here. This catapult was dealt with by the Mounted Company, largely anyway. There are still 9 of them remaining. There's still this unit of Halberdiers, but then they will have to try and hold off all of the Woodland Realms' advancing forces.
I'm afraid something changes in the course of battle, for defeat seems almost certain.
Indeed. The Nazgul and the Temple Inquisitors with their forces combined. Still the Adhalond Halberdiers fight on, but defeat does seem certain, fortunately for us. So at least we won't be coming in 3rd place, it looks like. There are still some coastal wardens. Well, they're routing, actually. There's still 7 units of... 7 in the unit of Havengard. There's Imrahil as well. He's not bloodied yet, either. He's got one of those strange unit models. He's luminous. There's 1 Melkor's Chosen running around. But yeah, this is... Things could have gone better for us, it must be said. And really, in terms of play, both the Kingdoms of Men and the team I was on, the Orcs, made several mistakes. I mean, you cannot camp a hill in a free-for-all and expect to win, really, because every time that happens, you're always going to get ganged up on. It's never a good idea. You need to be a little bit more... You need to be more clever about how you play it. If one of your team sort of camps a hill, that's fine, while the other one doesn't. But if both of you sort of cluster together, it's never going to work out well for you. And also, being overly defensive in the current build of the mod doesn't really work unless you have the skirmish advantage. And against the elves, you're never going to have that. Meanwhile, my ally made the mistake of trying to take the Avari Elder Pikes head on, and he wasted too much of his chaff units there. And now he just doesn't have enough units left to really be competitive. And of course, my biggest mistake was straying too far away, playing right into the hands of the Elven ambush. And definitely that was the thing that contributed to our downfall more than my ally charging into the pikes. Because we could have worn down the Kingdoms of Men, and then with what was left with Mordor's elite units, we could have tried to make a stand against the elves. But not without my army. My army in its entirety was basically wiped away by that ambush. I was very humbled by that. Definitely the most crushing loss of an army I've had in Reforged to date. But it was a fun battle, you know, it was fun to be a part of, and Mirkwood is one of those maps where you have to be on the lookout for that sort of thing, because looking out over the battlefield as a whole, you can see all the trees. It is basically the most heavily forested map in the game at the moment, I believe, and that's good, you know, because forested maps, I think, are underutilised. You know, most of the standard maps are just flat fields, and that gets boring. Whereas this sort of thing, there's varying terrain with this sort of central raised area. There's hills all over the place, there's ruins, and the forest. It's more interesting. It lends itself to more strategies and having to use more tactics than simply fanning out your infantry and trying to get rear charges with cavalry, which ultimately is what every single pitch battle on a flat field turns into. Meanwhile, we have the Dirith over here with their sexy shields getting into the face of the Temple Inquisitors, and at this point the Temple Inquisitors have, well, the Temple Guard I should say, have been in melee so long that the elites of the elves, or at least, well, this is mid-tier for the elves, even they are going to pose a significant challenge. Unfortunately for us, we're into the final 2,000 frames here. See, my crossbows are trying to do work, those Etalon halberds are routing. So at this point we can safely say that we at least managed to come in second, despite the fact we got ripped apart at every at every angle basically. Here Dirith pursuing that, and there's Imrahil gone, confirming at the hands of a Temple Guard, no less. So we have that in our favour. We have what's left of my pikes that weren't mauled by the archers of Lothlorien being caught in melee by the Dirith. My crossbows, I think I'm trying to go for, I'm trying to go for the Elder Royal Guard. And again, you can see that I am actually doing a good job of that. The crossbows are pretty lethal. And the Uruk-hai crossbows, it wasn't really seen in this map because of the ambush, but I've said it before, the crossbows need an ammunition nerf, because against certain factions and in certain ways they can win you the game all on their own without the enemy really being able to do all that much. And again, the crossbows do have less ammo than archers, but it doesn't matter because the crossbow killing power is so much higher. It's all about relative killing power. You can't give the crossbow such a heavy advantage. You can see that even a battered unit of Uruk-hai crossbows is going to be enough to put some serious hurt down on Galathran veteran warriors that are basically completely untouched, and that shouldn't really be the case. Temple Inquisitors, victory seems certain. So still the Mordor elites fight on, and that is the power of the Temple Inquisitors. You can see in here, unfortunately my crossbows were engaged in melee by what's left of the Galathran mounted company, with their lances and their fine elven blades. They can't afford to stick around too long in melee though. They're elven cav without any hit points, and at this point the Sylvan heavy spearmen are flanking around, and you can see that the Galathran veteran warriors have been committed to melee, and this is the end. The gaps in our line have been found. Not that they were difficult to find, considering we didn't have very many men left. The Nazgul is still there, but it's all over. Here come Lothlorien. And the well-coordinated ambush was something very worth showing.
Defeat seems almost certain.
I believe that was my ally admitting defeat, actually. Actually, no, that was me admitting defeat. My ally admits defeat, I think, after 600 more frames, so let's just go to ×2 speed. I think he wanted to let his Temple Guard and his Nazgul fight it out, but there's not really much point in that, because the Nazgul do take a long time dying, and it's not really too fun in this sort of situation when it's so obvious who's going to win. So yeah, this is the end. The elves still had cavalry. A crushing win for the elves in the end. But it was worth showing just to see the dynamics, the politics of a free-for-all as it happens, and also a very well executed ambush of which I was the victim. And as you can see, I was by far and away the most dead-weight player in the game, considering all of the... I barely got... Well, I didn't even get 800 kills. Very bad indeed. But, you know, people say that I never show battles in which I lose. Well, this is one where I got humiliated, as I said. And as we can see, all of the casualties I got, a unit of Uruk-hai pikemen, well, a unit of crossbows got literally 0. They were killed before they ever got to loose any of their bolts. A unit of pikes only got 3. That ambush was absolutely brutal. Both my units of berserkers did well though. So while my army was dying, at least my micro of the berserkers kind of paid off, because they did force the breakage of a line from Dale and Dol Amroth. But apart from that, not good for me, not my finest hour, but still very worth showing. A nice free-for-all. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.